Parents, are you worried about your child's lack of modesty in their choice of clothing? Please stay tuned to Catholic Parents Online. Welcome to Catholic Parents Online, a program that deals with the issues parents face while raising their children. I'm your host, Colleen Perfect. The servant of God, Pope Pius XII, addressed a Congress of the Latin Union of High Fashion, saying, "For decency in dress to be restored, the intention of those who design the fashions and those who wear them must be upright. In both, there must be an awakening of the conscience as to their responsibility for the tragic consequences that could result from clothing which is overly bold, especially if it is worn in public." Joining us to discuss the virtue of modest dress is Father Robert Altier, a priest from the Archdiocese of St. Paul in Minneapolis. Hello, Father.
Well, hello, Colleen.
Welcome back to our show.
Well, thanks. Great to be back. It has.
Yes, it's great to have you. Father, this is a very important issue we're dealing with tonight.
Yeah, this is critical in our day and age.
It certainly is. So we're going to try to cover as much as we can in a half an hour.
Well, good luck.
I'll try, and you will try, and the Holy Spirit will be with us. Father, I'm going to read some quotes from various individuals on modest and immodest dress, and along with those quotes, there'll be some of the teachings of what the Church is saying about the virtue of modesty. And then after I read them, if you could just take over and comment on what I've read.
All right.
So to start out with, I have a quote here from the supermodel, Kim Alexis. She's quoted in her book, A Model for a Better Future. She says, "Dressing like a floozy tells the world, look at me, want me, lust after me. I'm easy and you can have me. Displaying intimate parts of the body is a form of advertising for sex. So if you dress to attract sexual attention, you can hardly blame anyone else if that kind of attention comes your way. But dressing modestly tells the world, I respect myself and I insist on being treated with respect. It's possible to be stylish and attractive without wearing something that is too short, low cut, or see-through."
She's absolutely right. Now, the thing that's interesting, though, is if you ask most girls, why are you dressing, and to use her word, like a floozy, or why are you dressing in such a way that you would look like a prostitute, they'll tell you, well, that's not what I'm trying to do. I just want to be pretty. And the tragedy of it is that they think that that's what's pretty. Yeah, and what I need to tell the young women who might be watching tonight is that while the girl wants to be pretty, that is not what a boy sees. That's not what he sees at all. The more flesh that a girl shows, the more that is going to drive a male right up a wall. And it's going to lead him to all kinds of impure looks, glances, thoughts, desires, and all kinds of other things. And it makes the girl into an object. Not only is she presenting herself as an object, but she is being looked at as an object, which is exactly what this young woman said, that it attracts the wrong kind of attention. A girl, it's fine if she wants the attention of a boy, but she wants the proper attention. And so for the young ladies, if they would understand, if they would cover themselves properly, it forces the boy to look at her face. But if she's hanging out, if she's not properly covered, the last place he's going to be looking at is her face, because she's going to be looking at everything else. And when you're dealing with men, again, the way boys deal with things is completely opposite of the way girls deal with things. Boys are very physically oriented. And so what they actually will do with a girl, and this is not the way women think at all, a boy can actually abstract the body parts. And so rather than looking at the whole person the way that a woman will, a male can actually kind of look at body parts. He looks at a chest, or he looks at a back end, or he looks at legs, or whatever it may be, as if they don't belong to a person, as if they're not an integral part of a person. Women don't understand that because they think that that's completely gross. It is. But the fact of the matter is, if a girl presents herself that way, that's precisely the way she's going to be seen by the boys. She's not seeing herself that way, but every male sees her that way. And it's very difficult for boys to be able to ignore that and say, well, let's not look in those areas and let's just look at her eyes, or let's just look at her face. It's as the girl said here in that quote, it's an advertisement. That's the way a boy will see it. And it's interesting, you know, the problems with modesty are not new to our age. St. John Chrysostom back in the 4th century talked about modesty. And in that point, he made a very interesting point about this. He said, in society, who do the judges condemn as being guilty? The one who makes the poison or the one who administers it to kill somebody? And when you think about it that way, what he's saying is, which one is more guilty? The girl who presents herself in an immodest way or the boy who looks at her in an immodest way? Both are wrong. If the boy is looking at a girl in an impure, lustful way, that's a sin. But if the girl is presenting herself in an immodest way, it is a sin. And if she's doing it purposely to attract the attention of boys, it's a mortal sin. So the first thing that needs to be understood by both males and females is that the human person has an inherent dignity. We're made in the image and likeness of God. We are persons. We are not objects. We cannot think about one another as objects. We cannot treat one another as objects. We cannot present ourselves as objects. We must accept our own dignity so that we can present ourselves and carry ourselves with dignity so that we will be treated with dignity. But how can we treat somebody else with dignity or respect their dignity if we don't respect our own first?
That's right. Thank you, Father. Also, there's an author, former cable network anchor, image consultant, actress, model, and beauty queen by the name of Colleen Hammond, who wrote a book called Dressing with Dignity. It's a very good book, and actually she wrote the book because she was upset about how she felt an anger that she felt for the lies in society and used to dress in a less than modest manner. She says potentially tempting men to sin. And she states in her book, Dressing with Dignity, in 1930, the Congregation for the Clergy, by order of Pope Pius XI, issued a letter to the bishops that exhorted bishops, priests, nuns, teachers, parents, etc., to insist on modesty in those under their charge. The document concludes with these words: maidens and women dressed immodestly are to be debarred from Holy Communion and from acting as sponsors at the sacraments of baptism and confirmation. Further, if the offense be extreme, they may be even forbidden to enter the church.
Now, those are very powerful words.
Yes.
Now, let me tell you what happens in practice these days. First of all, people come to church dressed in any way that they seem to think doesn't matter.
Yes.
And if you say something to them, their response is, God doesn't care how I'm dressed, He just cares that I'm here.
Yeah, I've heard.
That's completely false. God is happy that you're there, but He also wants you to dress decently. It's the house of God. It's a house of prayer. If we think about it, St. Paul 2,000 years ago wrote to the Corinthians that a woman was to cover her head and sit in the back. Now, people look at that and say, oh, he was such a chauvinist. That's not the point. In the ancient world, the women were properly covered. And therefore, what was considered attractive and sexy was a woman's hair. And the longer her hair and the shinier it was, the more attractive that was. St. Paul knows men well. If you put a pretty girl in front of a male and you have mass going on, he's going to look at the girl and he's not going to pay any attention to the mass.
That's right.
So he said the girls should sit in the back, and meaning the guys sit in front so they're not looking at the girls.
Oh, okay.
And they're to cover their heads because they're not there to be flaunting themselves. They're not there to see if they can attract a guy. They're there at Mass to pray. Well, today, a girl's hair is about the last thing we need to worry about because it's everything else that needs to be covered up. And so it's not just a matter of saying it's good that you're at church, but who cares what you're dressed like? We need to present ourselves properly. We would not show up at the White House to meet the President of the United States looking that way. Why are you coming to God's house?
Yes.
And so, when the Pope said that if somebody is dressed immodestly, they should not receive communion, try that sometime and see what happens. There was a young woman who came to a wedding rehearsal, and it was horrible. And I walked up to her and I said, I'm sorry, you cannot be in the church looking like that. Do you have a sweater or something that you can put on? Thankfully, she had a sweater out in the car and she covered herself up. They then wrote a letter to the Archbishop to complain that I was so mean and so rotten. And this girl, it was horrible. I mean, she was hanging out all over the place, and it was pretty sad. But
they haven't a clue. They
no,
don't even understand.
No, and then they look at it and they thought that I was being unreasonable to say that she shouldn't be dressed like that in church. Now, interestingly, the girl herself understood, and she didn't seem to have a problem. What shocked me beyond all belief was it was the older women who were in their 60s who were angry.
Oh my heavens!
And I thought, wait a minute.
Yeah, that's strange.
Yeah, it's really unusual. That what we're dealing with. It used to be that the older women would present a good image,
right?
For the younger girls, but that's not happening today.
And they grew up learning these things,
exactly.
Whereas the girls today aren't learning these
They're not learning it, but unfortunately now, I suppose the women who are in their 40s and 50s and even in their 60s, if they grew up in the 60s and 70s, if that was part of their formation, look at what they got.
It all got left behind.
Exactly. So the example that they're giving is unfortunately very, very poor.
It's sad, but I think that almost in the Protestant churches, they seem to, I don't know if I'm right, but they dress better than they do in the Catholic churches.
Exactly. And Jesus is there in the tabernacle in a Catholic church, and he's not in a Protestant church, but they understand they're coming to the Lord's house. And so that we have some work to do.
Oh, we sure do, Father. The following excerpts appeared in a March 2005 edition of the Washington Times written by columnist Rebecca Hagelin. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name right, but she says, the sad fact is that a lot of today's tween and teen girls dress like streetwalkers. How do so many little girls end up looking like sex objects? How? Because their parents let them. Face the facts. Most 12 to 16-year-olds do not have access to a lot of cash, unless, of course, their parents give it to them. And it's usually the mom who happily drives the little darlings to the mall for a fun day of shopping. Face it, little girls dress according to what their mommies allow. I thought mothers were supposed to protect their daughters to teach them to value themselves and their bodies. What chance does a little girl stand of keeping her childhood or innocence intact when it's mommy that's driving her to the store and paying for the thongs, the itty-bitty skirts, the hipster jeans, and the plunging necklines? And when did fathers start letting their precious little girls dress like ladies of the night? Hello, is anybody out there?
And to think that that was in a secular newspaper, thanks be to God.
That's right.
But that, the point, I think there are a couple points in there that are of great importance. First of all, it is the parents' responsibility. The girls see the commercials, the girls see the magazines, the girls see the other kids at school or whatever, and there is a peer pressure to be like everyone else.
That's right.
They want to dress like everyone, and that's what they think is pretty because it's the in thing. And of course they fight, and their mom is a nerd because she doesn't allow them to dress like everyone else or whatever. But the fact is that the parents have to be able to put their foot down and say, no, I'm not going to allow my daughter to go out like that. I, for the life of me, have to agree with what that woman said. I do not understand why any father, knowing the way that males look at females, why any father would ever allow his daughter or his wife or anybody else to go out in a way that is immodest, knowing that she's going to be violated in the thoughts and desires of many people. But, one of the things I remember just this happened just last summer. I was someplace. This little girl is about 10 years old. And she walked through where I was standing, and she was so scantily clad, I was horrified. And the first thought in my mind is, what mother would ever allow a little girl of that age to walk out of the house looking like that? And about 30 seconds later, her mother came through, dressed almost identically.
Oh, Father.
And I said, well, I guess that answers the question. You know, the daughter is just dressing the way the mother is. And why would the mother allow the daughter to go out like that? Because the mother doesn't think it's a problem. And so if the mother doesn't recognize her dignity, how can she teach her daughter that the daughter has dignity? And so these are the things that they have to really start to work on, is to be able to see that a woman is not an object. A woman is a person made in the image and likeness of God. She has dignity, inherent dignity as a person, and that must be respected, and she must be treated with that dignity in the way not only that she presents herself, but in the way that others would approach her.
Father, the church is a good place for parents to start. If they'd start listening to some of the teachings of the church, the 1995 document of the Pontifical Council on the Family, entitled The Truth and Meaning of Human Sexuality, says it's the duty of parents to protect the young from the aggressions they are subjected to by the media. The practice of decency and modesty in speech, action, and dress is very important for creating an atmosphere suitable to the growth of chastity. But this must be well motivated by respect for one's own body and the dignity of others. Parents, as we have said, should be watchful so that certain immoral fashions and attitudes do not violate the integrity of the home, especially through misuse of the mass media. May no one shirk from this duty by using the excuse that he or she is not involved.
There are a couple things here. First of all, as you pointed out, what the church teaches is very clear, and if people would look at that, they would be able to have the guidance. But the problem is most people don't know where to find the church documents, or they don't even know they're there. But the TV is right in their home, the magazines are in their home, the newspapers in their home, they see the billboards, they have the people walking around, and so they're so accustomed to the culture. And tragically for most people in our culture, God gets approximately 1 hour a week. The TV is getting hours a day, the computer is getting hours a day, the media is what's forming their consciences. And that's the tragedy, because what's being presented to them by the media is pretty skewed, we'd have to admit. And so, you know, if people would look up perhaps on the Vatican website, they can find all these documents. If they would go to a Catholic bookstore, they could find these kind of documents. But it also requires wanting to live according to the mind of Christ, not according to the mind of the culture. And that's where the difference comes in. We want to be able to fit in with the culture where it's reasonable to do so. That's one of the things Christian people have always been able to work within a culture. But at the same time, we have to reject what is not good within a culture. And we have to be able to draw the lines and make the distinctions. And that's something that's very, very important. And our culture, again, if we think about just what's there and the cultural problems, there's a tragic story that I read about. This was a couple of years ago. It happened out at Berkeley University out in California. And there was a young man who went to school there. He looked in the student handbook at the dress code, and he realized that based on what was there, he could get away with something. So the only thing that he wore to class was a backpack. Period.
He was naked.
He was naked. And he came to class every day totally naked, except he had his backpack on when he walked in the door. The boys were angry. The girls were completely embarrassed and very uncomfortable. The administration did nothing about this for several weeks because they couldn't find a reason to be able to say that what he was doing was wrong based on the rules that they had in their handbook. And so this went on. They finally found some other reason to be able to say, well, you can't be coming to school here anymore, but it had nothing to do with the way he was coming and arriving in class. But the thing is that we have to then ask the question, if a girl comes to class wearing almost nothing, why aren't the girls upset? Why aren't the boys upset? The girls don't seem to be fazed at all, and the boys, of course, are fazed in a very different way, and they're not upset about it at all because they're staring at the girls that are that way. And I've often thought about this, and I used to present this to the kids in class when I taught the 12th graders. I would say, okay, if this is okay for a girl to walk around that way, let's just switch it for a moment. I'm not saying let's put the girls' clothes on the boys. I'm saying let's put the same amount of cloth onto a boy's body as what these girls are wearing, what would you say? And they understood. Oh, that was disgusting. I said, well, if it's disgusting for a boy to walk around that way, why is it okay for a girl to walk around that way? A girl, again, is not an object. And yet that's the way that things are being presented to them. And so we need to be able to get to that point of being able to see just how far we've gone astray. That if girls are going to be presented that way, and they're going to be looked at that way, that it's going to continue if they don't see that this is wrong. And so we need to start pulling this back, and we need to start helping girls to see their dignity, to accept their dignity, and be able to dress with dignity and present themselves that way.
I was reading where, one of the, it might have been Colleen Kelly Mast had said, parents have to start teaching their children, training their children in modesty at the ages of 5 and 6 years old. By when they take them shopping, they should put it into the context of see how nice and modest this outfit is. And it's really important to start at that young age.
It's very important, but it's not only in the dress. You know, a lot of parents, they enroll their kids, for instance, in dance class. And I remember watching a talent show, and there were kindergartners and first graders, and they got up to do this dance. Not only were they dressed in a way that I was horrified by, but the way that they shook their little bodies and moved, it was purely sensual.
Yeah.
And the little child had no idea this is what they were taught to do.
But the adults think it's so cute. And,
but it was gross.
Yeah,
and again, a violation of the innocence of that child. And the child's just doing what she was being taught to do. So you're absolutely right. We need to start very young, not only with the fashions, but with the whole comportment. How does a girl carry herself? How does she present herself? You know, because the way that a girl will walk and stand and move and so on is going to say a lot about what she's doing and who she is.
That's right.
And so if the fathers, I really think a lot of this comes down to the fathers. If the fathers would uphold the dignity of their daughters and help them to understand that, then the mothers will be able to teach the girls how to carry themselves, help them to see what truly is pretty and how pretty they are in this dress that properly covers them, and that the pretty part isn't how much flesh they're showing, but what's pretty is the frilly dress and the pretty hair and the pretty eyes and things like that, and that she doesn't have to be half naked in order to be pretty.
I went to a wedding fair recently, and my one son is getting married in the fall, and my future daughter-in-law brought me to a wedding fair to look at different things, and they had a style show of wedding dresses. And there were some that were okay, but most of them were just very revealing. And I just noticed, instead of my eyes going to the pretty face of the model, I was looking at her breasts or her rear end. Or I thought, you know, it's just that one special, beautiful day of the woman's life. And why would they want to wear a dress that takes away from the beauty of, you know, it's just pathetic.
The tragedy is, in dealing with enough brides, they've told me they've gone from one bridal shop to the next and they could not find anything that was modest. Nothing had sleeves, nothing covered the chest, nothing covered the back. It was just very, very revealing, and they were very frustrated with that.
Father, we don't have a lot of time left, but I think it's important to offer our viewers some resources that might be helpful to them. And there's quite a few different resources on the internet, good websites that offer some great resources and some modest clothing lines. I'll just mention a few. There's one called Pure Fashion, which is an international faith-based program designed for girls in grades 8 to 12 to help young women rediscover and reaffirm their innate value and authentic femininity. Young women attend training sessions to learn about the virtues of modesty, purity, and chastity, as well as the ins and outs of hair, makeup, and posture, like you were talking about. And the website is www.purefashion.com. Another local site is called Upstream Girl and can be found at www.upstreamgirl.com. And then also, parents or grandparents may want to give their daughter or granddaughter a gift subscription to True Girl. It's a new magazine of faith, life, and fashion for Catholic teenage girls. True Life includes fashion, entertainment, advice, health and beauty tips, and fun quizzes without all the celebrity gossip and immodesty. And you can find out more at www.truegirlonline.net. And then also I want to mention the book by Colleen Hammond that we talked about, Dressing with Dignity.
Right.
That's a very good book. It offers a lot of good insights. And then, of course, last but not least, parents should be reading the beautiful church document, The Truth and Meaning of Human Sexuality.
Absolutely.
It's not difficult to read.
No,
they stay away from it because they
brief
think,
and simple,
yes.
but...
Father, I guess our time is up. I just want to thank you again for all your good insights.
Thank you. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Father. God bless you.
Thank you.
The Catechism of the Catholic Church says the following about the virtue of modesty. Modesty is a perfection that the Holy Spirit forms in us as the first fruits of eternal glory. Purity requires modesty, an integral part of temperance. Modesty protects the intimate center of the person. It means refusing to unveil what should remain hidden. It is ordered to chastity, to whose sensitivity it bears witness. It guides how one looks at others and behaves toward them in conformity with the dignity of persons and their solidarity. Modesty protects the mystery of persons and their love. It encourages patience and moderation in loving relationships. It requires that the conditions for the definite giving and commitment of man and woman to one another be fulfilled. Teaching children and adolescents modesty means awakening in them respect for the human person. Thanks for watching. God bless you and yours.
Welcome to Catholic Parents Online, a program that deals with the issues parents face while raising their children.
The Catholic Catechism states that the divine fatherhood is the source of the human fatherhood. This is the foundation of the honor owed to parents. Catholic Parents Online is next.
Motherhood is at the center of that vocation of married life. And so it is the most important thing in the whole world as far as being on the natural level. Priesthood being a supernatural gift, parenthood being a natural gift, and therefore being a mother is the single greatest gift in the whole world. There is nothing higher that one can strive for than to be a mother. Even the people who have told us over the years that fathers really aren't important and it's not necessary and all this other stuff are having to come back around now and say, wait a second, we didn't realize and you know exactly what the church has taught, what we read in Scripture. Fatherhood is absolutely essential for the good of the family, for the good of these children, and of course, for the good of his wife.